we find that if we give them an hour to see a family, they tease out all sorts of things and make all sorts of really brilliant and beautiful suggestions and form really great connections and relationships with the families. And they, even for the kids who will then come on to see myself or one of the other paediatricians, often the person who's actually the linchpin in that child's care in our clinic is actually the GP who saw them first and really started to explore what was going on for the child and family.
Welcome back to No Place Like Home podcast. I'm Kath and I'm joined today by the lovely Larissa.
Hello.
And we're joined again by Victoria Mckay.
Hi, guys.
Welcome back.
We spoke last time, Victoria, about a little bit about your personal journey through motherhood, a bit about your education and training. So we want to kind of delve a little bit deeper and hear a little bit about what's going on for you now and your incredible establishment that you have as Paediatric People.
Thank you.
So tell us a bit about it.
So Paediatric People is a private paediatric practice in Elsternwick. We've been open, we're about a week off our first birthday now.
Yay.
And we are a group of currently 100% women, GPs, paediatricians, paediatric nursing. And we see kids from 0 through to 18 and their families. And in setting it up, I'd worked a lot in public and in private paediatrics in Melbourne. And I really felt like there was this capacity to do this kind of work better. Like I really felt like the systems that I was working in were affecting the kind of care that I could give kids and families. And I felt like they needed more time with us. And I felt like they needed better aftercare, like they needed to be able to get in contact. Like if we started a medicine or gave them feedback, they needed to be able to get in contact with us and like talk about how it was going. And we needed to be able to work in a system where that could actually happen. And it also came from the fact that like when I was really sitting down and thinking about how am I going to set this up? You know, I've got this idea. I want to do things differently. How could this actually work? One of the other real challenges that I was thinking about was that a lot of paediatricians in Melbourne have closed their books or else.
Yeah, it's a really big problem.
Isn't it?
Only because I've just gotten into this world with my youngest Seb.
Yeah.
And it is wild how we were referred to only really a handful of clinics. Yeah. And even then, like the wait lists were incredible.
They're insane. Like many paediatricians have books that are 12 to 18 months long, or else they actually are at a point where they've said we've had to close our books because we can't actually, which means families get on the phone and they call around like 5-10 sets of people. So this was the other real issue that I was toying with. And so I came, like those things sort of fed together, which was how we came up with this sort of like, I guess, shared care, which is really popular in maternity care.
Yeah.
But that's the approach that we've got here. So basically we've taken a team of people and said, all right, if we have a team, does that mean that we could then deliver care better to a child and family? How could that work? So we are a work in progress because we keep coming up with new ideas. You know, we try different things.
How
we go,
amazing though.
It's fun.
Yeah. As a business owner, I hear you.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that the better outcomes, that the evolution of those challenges and successes that creates is only a better outcome for ultimately your patients, right?
Yeah, I think it's allowing us, we're definitely seeing, because we keep asking people for feedback as well. We really want the feedback from kids and families to know how is this working for them. And we absolutely are taking that on board to inform the next iteration, every
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
iteration of the
Yes.
model. But we see definitely that for us as clinicians working in it, like we get this real strength and I think resilience in terms of ongoing capacity to keep on working because we've got a team ourselves, and then we definitely see that it makes a difference for the kids and families. Yeah.
So you obviously saw quite a big gap in the care that was needing to be given.
Yeah.
Obviously, then you put together this pretty incredible niche
Yeah. Yeah.
facility. What sort of specialists work in your team?
Yeah, thanks. So we are currently a team of specialist general practitioners and paediatricians. And those paediatricians are general paediatricians or developmental behavioural paediatricians. So currently we don't have any, and again, this might change as, at being only the 1 year old mark.
Yeah.
This might well morph a little bit as we go on, where we would think about adding in other specialists. I'm quite interested to think about how a psychiatrist could fit into our mix. I feel like that would really add to the kind of work that we're doing.
Yeah.
And certainly a couple of our doctors have got significant experience in neonatology. So that is another real aspect of our care. We're really working really carefully and thinking about how babies are managed in the community. So we're setting up baby clinic as part of our in-house team.
Okay.
And so I am keen to think about, that will be our next area of development, is to really further promote and build richness into the team of clinicians we've got working in that. So really thinking about adding in, for instance, lactation consultants, et cetera, to think about how we do that. But I guess the other point of difference is that our GPs are extremely experienced, highly intelligent people and working in consultation with paediatricians and set up with the time that they need to give care to families, because we know how smart and capable and experienced GPs are. But when their diaries are built on 5 to 10 minute increments, they can't. You can't do. I don't think you can give proper care.
No.
And getting to
for
the crux
complex
of the problem.
issues. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But we find that if we give them an hour to see a family, they tease out all sorts of things and make all sorts of really brilliant and beautiful suggestions and form really great connections and relationships with the families. And they, even for the kids who will then come on to see myself or one of the other paediatricians, often the person who's actually the linchpin in that child's care in our clinic is actually the GP who saw them first and really started to explore what was going on for the child and family.
Do you think that also aids this whole, there's a lot of talk around the overdiagnoses, particularly of children at the moment, of autism, ADHD, lots of these different behavioural patterns and challenges. Do you think that it has further advanced not just, and I say this lightly, but not just throwing out those sort of diagnoses, because when people do have 5-10 minute increments, it's really easy to just be like, yep, this is what they've got, this is what it looks like, and just take this. Whereas do you feel like the time that you're giving those families is teasing out a lot of those, that it might not actually be that let's look at this first, or those environmental factors?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I reckon to understand a child's, I know we sort of touched on this last episode, but to actually understand a child, we have to understand their family. And you can't do that in 5 or 10 minutes. Or as a paediatrician, you can't do it in half an hour. It takes us a couple of appointments to actually, because what's important when I'm thinking about whether I should talk to a family, how I should talk to a family about their child's development, it's really important for me to know how that family sees their child and what is important to that family. There are some families for whom having an ADHD or an autism diagnosis, and some children for whom having that diagnosis is a real positive, right? It allows them to understand themselves. It allows a family to understand the child. That's right. It's something and I think, look, there's still a lot of things to improve in healthcare and society and all that sort of stuff. But there has been actually a really beautiful transformation, I think, about the way our society sees, for instance, neurodiversity. And so there's much more of an openness now. So, for instance, a child who might have felt, I don't fit in, I'm struggling to make friends, I'm not getting I'm getting in trouble with the teacher. And if we can reframe that for the child and family and go, hey, your little person, it's not can't, it's not won't.
Yeah.
It's maybe can't yet. Or it's maybe I need a bit of extra support to do these things.
Yeah.
So for that aspect it really helps. But I think sort of going back to what you were asking, Larissa, like I do think that the GPs are really, I think both GPs and paediatricians, we look really holistically at a child. And so I think especially having that real, it's a bit like the way you have created space here, you know, like I guess it's not a physical thing, but we have created space to understand a family, and I think that really helps.
Are there things that you as a paediatrician and your group are looking at that sit around developmental milestones? Like, are there things that are like, oh, here's a red flag? Like, not that we like to say that necessarily, but and looking at a family holistically, what does that look like? Milestones, development?
Yeah, it really depends on the age of a child.
Yeah, okay.
And it really, I think one of the key things is to see a child and understand what they've done over time, and to see it in the context of what else is going on for that child. So for instance, you know, a child who, on the face of it, you know, like it's wonderful having so much information on the internet and that sort of stuff, but sometimes it's also a real pressure for families because, for instance, you know, the Green Book or the Raising Children's Network, these are all things that I absolutely love and really appreciate that they exist. But nonetheless, a family who's got concerns, for instance, about their child's development, I think there can be a lot of pressures from, you know, like, oh gosh, my child hasn't got 50 words at the age of 2 years old, or oh gosh, you know, the other kids in the mother's group are walking now, but my child is still not walking, for instance. A lot of families will come to us really worried about a red flag. And often one of the beautiful things we can do is actually say, we can actually take their anxiety. Like, it's almost like, you know, it's like the passing of the anxiety. We go, actually, let us hold this for you. We're going to look at your child overall in terms of their development. We're going to understand.
Is that their own red flag that they're like diagnosing their supposed red flag.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like Google Doctor. Yeah, it's the worst thing you can do.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll not infrequently get families coming concerned about where their child's up to at 2 or 3 years old in terms of their speech or their attention or their play skills or whatever. And a lot of the work we do is actually about non-medicalising and just trying to allow the child and the family to develop and flourish, like to say to understand what does your child or your family need right now. Let's try and put those things in place. And then to be able to say, you know what, don't you worry about it. We'll keep an eye on these things. You guys are you're getting the most important stuff right already, which is loving your child and helping them get to sleep and feeding them and, you know.
I guess if you're looking at that, like somebody has come to see you, they're bringing their child to you because whether they have realised that something's not quite right, or somebody or many people have said, "Oh, that's not quite right."
Yeah.
When for you is a developmental delay an issue?
So there's certainly, you know, various, I guess, arbitrary or like. Maybe not arbitrary. Arbitrary might not be the right word, but there's certain sort of like
obvious
things, milestones that I keep in my head to think about when I'm examining a child or understanding a child, you know. So, yeah, I've got a number of them, but, you know, like the things that we sort of think about, you know, thinking about when would a child learn to smile, or when might a child be expected to sit independently? When is it okay for a child not to have walked? When's it okay for a child not to have developed a tooth? You know, like there's all sorts of, you know, those sorts of key milestone moments.
And they're general. Like they're what is expected as far as textbooks.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
right. So they come from textbooks and they come from what the norms are in our society.
Yeah.
And I guess I've been doing this for long enough now to know that where a child is up to right now none of us have got a crystal ball. So a child has always got the most incredible opportunity for development. And so, you know, even when a family comes to me and their child is 4 years old and not speaking, and I had a beautiful family yesterday, child comes and they're 4 years old and not speaking, that absolutely does not mean that child is not going to have great functional language down the track. So there are the norms. There are the things that somebody else might say, hey, on the balance of things, we'd predict that. But each given individual child has an unmatched potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just want to say that this is just general advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Because everybody's unique. And if you are listening to this and you do feel like there are some things that are resonating with you, we 100%, seek out a paediatrician, Paediatric People, and seek that advice for yourself.
Absolutely. I think what I'm trying to say is not that you shouldn't have oversight. Like if you or other people around you, because I guess we sort of touched on this last episode as well. Like the first time you actually often see a child develop is with your own child. So to actually try and understand what is typical and what is atypical for development is really hard. It's a lot of pressure for a family. If you or anyone around you has raised a question, the easiest thing is to just get a checkup, right? And your GP is often a beautiful place to start, or your health nurse, in terms of just giving you an idea about how your child's developing. And as paediatricians, there's absolutely times where people come to me and I say, okay, we really need to do some blood tests, or hey, we really need to go ahead and get the ball rolling on this. We really need to get some support in place. I guess what I'm really hoping to convey is that I don't want that pressure to, like, I think a lot of families, the majority of families we see, come to us terribly anxious. By the time they get to see us, they've been in a space of worry for some time.
Yeah, I think, just listening to you speak, and then obviously Seb has had an occupational therapist since he was in prep, and then he's had a speech pathologist since he was in year 1, and going into grade 4, his school sort of see that as quite, that next step up in terms of his primary education, and there's a lot more independence that comes with what he's doing. So, they're saying, look, there's still some things that he's just not hitting for us. And in order for us to be able to provide the support we need, we feel like he now needs this assessment. And initially that was really overwhelming for John and I. And we were like, oh my God, what does this mean? And I think the first thing we felt was like, what have we done wrong? But, it's just like I feel so much better now going through the process and speaking to a few more people sort of within his school, and it's actually really common.
Yeah.
I didn't realise how common it is, but certainly at Seb's school there's, and you might be able to confirm this or not, but they certainly see a lot of the boys within the school are having these particular issues, which I find really interesting as a general sort of statistic. But it's a really, it seems really common.
Oh, it's super common. And I think it comes from two places, or it comes from a few places, but one of the key things is that we're now in a situation as a society where we can really actually spend a lot of time focusing and understanding on our children and understanding our children. So we're actually in a position where we can think about, how do I support my child to develop and be, it's hard to think about this without using some sort of like hackneyed phrase, but like almost like the best version of themselves, right? Like how do we all want our children to grow up and thrive, right? And so a lot of the work that we get to do now, it's it's so delightful to be in that position. It's almost becomes like, like the coach for a child, right? Because it's actually about allowing that little person, as you've said, Larissa, to thrive. Yeah, and that's beautiful. That is a beautiful thing. And that changes, I think that really helps to change the mentality. Like we're not doing it because necessarily it's a problem. We're doing it because we want to allow this little person to reach their potential.
Yeah.
We want them to be happy. We want them to come into themselves. Yeah.
I think for me as well, the school put it in beautiful context for me. And, they were sort of saying, so there's a lot that the public eye don't see, but you would be surprised that a lot of people that went to this school are now professional athletes.
Yeah.
And actually the support structures that they have in place because of their learning difficulties or neurodivergence, the systems are put in place in order to support them, but you wouldn't see it on a football field or you wouldn't see it, on a pitch or and so I think it's just that reframing of it as opposed to thinking there's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
That reframe for me was a really like just a monumental pivot for John and I to be like, oh, okay, there's nothing actually, there's nothing wrong with him. It's just a different level of support and it just looks different.
It's nice, isn't it, to have the capacity to actually individualise to a child what they need. And I think that, I guess there's we see a lot of kids coming to us now with questions around, could my child have autism? Could my child have ADHD, etc.? We're definitely in a situation where sometimes we say to families, look, your child, there are suggestions here of this or there's a tendency towards it, but we don't need to go there with a medicalisation.
Yeah.
Let's think about getting the basics right, which for me is like sleep, great diet, moving your body, connections, self-esteem, and then beyond that, perhaps should we think about learning some strategies with a psychologist or an OT or a speechy? Yeah, that's right. So I think that also helps for people to understand that, when we're talking about understanding a child's development, sometimes it is the understanding that's important, not the medical diagnosis that comes out at the end.
Yeah.
That feels like an important point, really. Like obviously once you get to that point where you really need, you feel the pressure, whether it's your own perceived pressure or people around you are saying to you, this is not right.
Yeah.
How you navigate that, having that as the crux of that. Like it's not about the medical diagnoses at the end. It's maybe the strategies that are built in there.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that we definitely know that there are some conditions, for instance, ADHD, which are often a child will really have significant benefit from medicine and that can be done in a really safe and careful kind of way. And for me, it's not the medicalisation that's important. It's the same way as if my child had difficulty with vision, I'd give them a pair of glasses so they could read. I wouldn't say to a kid, oh, you're just bad at maths because you can't see the board. I would say, here's your glasses. Now you need to go and now you do have to go and do your maths homework.
That's a great way of I love that.
Yeah. So for us, sometimes we're forced to medicalise a little bit because we have to medicalise. We have to, for instance, diagnose ADHD in order to offer a child a trial of medicine. But the focus for us is not on necessarily a diagnosis or we don't have like a one-size-fits-all approach to treatment. Yeah. It's really about what will allow this little person to
the best outcome.
Yeah, to thrive.
I guess if you're going down this path and you are thinking to yourself, all right, how do I even navigate this? How would you tell someone who's about to embark on this journey what's the best way to find the right practitioner for their child?
what is the best way to find the right I think word of mouth is really helpful. I think that looking at, I think you do get a bit of a sense from people from things like websites or perhaps where you've heard them talk. I think it becomes fairly clear pretty quickly about what somebody's attitude is and whether that aligns with a family's view of their child. If it doesn't align, then that person is not going to be a good fit. And also, I always say to families, and I know that this is easier to say than to do or real life, but I say, if I was buying a car, I would never get one quote. Unless I was really happy with that quote, right?
Yeah.
I would, if I wasn't happy, I wouldn't think twice about going and getting another perspective. And I think about that with paediatricians. I think about that with GPs. I think about that with psychologists. It has to be, this becomes kind of personal kind of work, and it has to be the right mix, so it's the critical thing is that a family and a child are actually comfortable with the person that they're seeing.
It's a relationship.
It is
because
a relationship.
It's not. Because generally, 9 times out of 10, you would think that it's a relationship that is going to be going for quite some time.
Yeah.
Unlike sometimes a GP visit where it's like acute and it's this and it's, but you would think if you're at that level of needing to go and see a paediatrician that there might be
that's
a
right.
reason to be seeing them for quite a number of years or months or so. Yeah, the relationship aspect is really important.
Yeah. And I think, for instance, if you end up in a situation where your paediatrician is saying to you, hey, I think there's a diagnosis at play here, it is really important. Certainly what I see for families is it's really important that there is a trust relationship there with their paediatrician first.
Yep.
Because if that relationship doesn't exist, then that really critically plays into how the family respond to the diagnosis.
I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you, Victoria. I've certainly learnt a lot. Obviously it resonates with me a lot because I'm in the space at the moment with Sebastian, my youngest. But we will put all of the details of Paediatric People in the space where we do that, somewhere down below where you're listening. And thank you so much. For anyone out there, go and see Dr. Victoria at Paediatric People and her team. They are a really beautiful space, aren't they, Kath, when we went really out there to visit? So
definitely not your traditional doctor surgery. The vibes are very chill.
Very beautiful. So thank you again.
Thanks, guys. Really nice to join you today.
Thank you.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.